The following is part of a collection of interviews conducted by El Grupo El Ron, a non-profit group dedicated to eradicating false concepts in all fields of knowledge through the teachings of the Ascended Masters of Light, via medium, Jorge Raul Olguin. September 6, 2005. Messages from the Solar Logos. Master Jesus. A question I and many others have wondered for a long time is, who was in fact Mary Magdalene?
When she was incarnated, she was a being that loved me as a master, she respected me, and she has had at times a wrong life.
Was she a prostitute?
Yes, but many people confuse her with that prostitute they wanted to stone, and it is not her. For that reason I say that there are misunderstandings.
What was the name of that prostitute they wanted to stone?
Her name was Miriam, but this was a very common name in that time, just like Joshua.
Was Mary Magdalene simply a passionate follower then?
Totally.
How old was Mary Magdalena when she met you?
She was 3 years younger than me. When I disembodied I was 35 years and 8 months old, and she was perhaps 32 years old.
What about all they say about Mary Magdalene who married you secretly, and even bore children?
I will say at least not in this universe. I can visualize that spiritual being who in the physical plane was called Leonardo da Vinci, who painted that painting so wonderful called The Last Supper, and I assure you that the person he painted at my side was my dear disciple, John Zebedee, and not a woman as some have speculated.
I understand. Everything was a fantasy of others then.
Correct.
Where was Mary Magdalene born?
In Judea.
Was she a family friend?
She was simply an acquaintance.
But she was the same Mary Magdalene who was at the tomb and who saw the extraterrestrials who assisted you there, although obviously she didn't know they were extraterrestrials.
Exactly.
Where was your place of birth?
Bethlehem. August 6th of the year 6 BC.
And the famous three magi that came after your birth?
Directly they were wise men from the east and they were not kings or magicians.
I understand. And were their names actually Caspar, Melchior and Balthasar?
Those are mythological names, they don't have anything to do with reality.
I understand. What happened in your life from 12 years old until your public life began? I ask it because we know very little about it.
I was in India with different masters, I learned different languages, I studied Buddhism, I studied Brahmanism. I rejected Brahmanism entirely because its karmatic theory didn't fit with me, it seemed cruel. On the other hand, Buddhism, with its attachment and with the karma of service, had a lot in common with my way of thinking.
What I don't understand is if you received messages or knowledge directly from the Christic energy and the Absolute, why were you receiving those teachings that were surely obsolete?
I learned those things in the same way. You can read a book and you can make use of those things that you consider useful and reject those things you consider useless.
I understand. What was your activity in the places you were?
Service, always the service, helping the poor and sick. I have learned that one could touch a leprous and not be contaminated, and I am speaking of 2,000 years ago, when there was fear of leprosy.
Yes, I remember I read that they even put a bell to the leper's neck to warn others of his proximity. As for miracles, today we know that there are no miracles, but extraordinary facts. According to my spiritual guide Ron Hubbard, you had 3 healing genes, when all of us usually have 2.
In history, there are some people that also had them. For example, this vessel in a past life, when he was incarnated as Ananda, cousin of Siddhartha, had the 3 genes.
Does this vessel also have them now?
Correct, but when he was incarnated as John Zebedee, he did not.
Aside from this vessel at the present time, is there someone else who has these 3 genes?
Yes, there is a 22-year-old girl in Russia, called Tatiana Romanova.
Does she heal?
No, because she doesn't have the knowledge.
What do these 3 genes concretely do? Can we understand that technique if you explain it to us?
I have the clear concept of what they do, we will try so that the vessel could translate it. My concept is limited to the spoken language. All the human beings have certain energy, a certain aura. The aura can get sick, as well as the physical part can get sick. The aura can weaken, and when weakening it can absorb negative vibrations. In the same way, if the aura is strong, it can repel negative vibrations. What the genes do is to modify, somehow, the auric system to heal some ailment. But don't take this as a mythological miracle. There have been cases in which with an extra gene a tumor has been dissolved. It is necessary to clarify something which is extremely important. Here a lot has been said about the placebo effect. The placebo effect can also dissolve a tumor, because it can create an euphoria in the person due to the trust this person has to a certain medicine or the trust to a certain therapist, and automatically channeling unconsciously this energy because one doesn't use the energy of the Father consciously.
Didn't you cure lepers, for instance? You made blind people see instantly. Is it true what the Bible says?
Yes, but not all the cases were like that. Let's talk about the blind men. There were blind people who suffered of cataracts, others had certain problems. Keep in mind that in that time there was so little hygiene, at least in my town, that directly there were people who didn't have leprosy, but rather they were eaten away by insects. They had lice, they had nits, and they had what you call crabs in the pubic part. The healings I performed were not as the Bible says, and yes, it is true, to many people I sent them to be cleaned, and with that the problem was solved. To some of them water was sprinkled on their eyes so that they could see, and it is not true that a hand could grow to a cripple. There is too much mythical things attributed in all these issues. We know that we cannot change the laws of the physical plane.
Concretely, let's move on to an overwhelming case. For example, a leper that you have healed. I ask it because the readers want to know. They know that miracles do not exist. Instead, we call them extraordinary facts that have a scientific explanation.
Directly the third gene is the healing gene that sends that energy. It can end up modifying certain texture, it can end up eradicating certain virus, certain bacteria or certain fungi or certain dermatological problem, and that person automatically can be healed.
Instantaneously?
No, it is not like that. The biblical writings have falsified the truth. It's not that a person who has a certain problem is healed when one touches him. Days can pass, even weeks before that happens. It is very easy to write.
I understand what you want to tell me. Then all the healings that you performed have been done during a certain time.
Exactly, and I am going ahead of you because I know you will ask about Lazarus.
Yes, it is true.
We know that the body was not corrupted, because not even through the Christic energy that also is channeled by this vessel that so kindly houses me, my dear disciple, one could resuscitate somebody whose body is corrupted. But it is not instant as some religious teachers will have you believe.
Are you referring to those pseudo-therapists that come from the Lutheran doctrine and who call themselves evangelists, that allegedly perform healings in the stadiums or television programs?
Exactly. But it is not true that a person who has suffered the illness called polio, as you call it, is going to be healed by a supposed healer automatically with a touch of the hand and make him dance as if the illness had disappeared.
Let's see if I understand. Did you ever touch a sick person and this person was cured instantly?
Yes, that happened. There was a blind person who had cornea and lens problems, and through the energy of the third gene, that unbalanced sight was stabilized.
And what about the curing of possessed people?
A demon cannot possess any embodied being due to an issue of their free will. Even the strongest demon could not take possession of any body by force. In the cases they do it, it is because an embodied being opens up the door to the shepherd or the priest, and then he allows the demon to enter. You may have seen in different temples how those possessed people writhe and wiggle on the floor, with convulsive spasms, expelling foam through their mouths. In those cases I directly send them Christic energy that automatically rejects all demons. The Christic energy cleans everything.
Did the extraterrestrials help you at some time with the healings?
No, with the healings never. Yes, it is true that, in what the Bible calls a transfiguration, they have made me radioactive due to the manner they handled my body after my crucifixion.
Master, how did you perform the multiplication of the loaves of bread and the fishes? We know that they were extracted from a parallel universe, is that correct? Did the Christic energy intervene?
That's right. That Christic energy was granted to me since the moment my cousin baptized me in the Jordan River.
It's clear. To end this session, If I may ask you, which was the moment of your life that impacted you the most when you were in body 2,000 years ago?
The moment I fell in love with Miriam at Jacob's Well. I will leave you with all my blessings.